Hi there. It's September the 16th, and we continue our journey through the prophecies of Isaiah, Yeshayahu in Hebrew, that means the Lord saves. And we come now to chapters 22, 23, and 24. These are three decrees, three declarations again, which Isaiah makes, three insights which Isaiah has into different situations. In chapter 22, he refers to the valley of vision, the Gehizion. Now, vision here is to do with revelation, and it's considered by most scholars to be referring to Jerusalem, which is on hills and so has valleys beside it. And of course it's the place of Isaiah's own chazon, his own vision, and therefore he's talking to Jerusalem. And it seems to be in the first few verses, the first 2 or 3 verses, that there's a rejoicing in the valley of vision, there's a rejoicing in the city, probably because the Assyrians have been turned away. But in verse 4 we find that the prophet Isaiah is still weeping, because he sees that although the Assyrians have been turned away, there will be a greater deluge coming. There will be a reckoning coming through the Babylonians who are going to sweep over and who are going to eventually destroy the city. And so there is a real sense of foreboding that there's a coming retribution that is coming on Jerusalem and Judah because of its disobedience, even though it has escaped the Assyrians. Chapter 23 is a declaration concerning Tyre. Now, Tyre was the great port city on to the northwest from Judah and Israel, right on the coast, and it was an amazing city because it was built, there was a causeway to an artificial island, and this gave it a real defensive advantage. And so it's coming down, so it's falling would be a huge cost. It's a very rich city, it's a very powerful city, it's a very proud city, and it's also a city that had provided much to Israel in the days of Solomon and David. Much of its supplies had come from Hiram, king of Tyre, to help build the temple, so there's a certain relationship between Israel and Tyre. But Isaiah sees it is also going to fall, it is also going to come under this general judgment which is coming when the upheaval of the nations happens, and they will not escape. And then in chapter 24 there's a general picture of the world, a wider world, in mourning, in grieving because of the upheaval, because of the violence, because of the war that's going on. But right in the middle there's the promise of a remnant, the gleanings of grapes it talks about. There will be a few who come, because God's purpose, even through this whole time of upheaval, God's purpose is still to establish Jerusalem as the praise, to establish Zion as the place of his messianic king. Right at the end, we read that right at the end of chapter 24. So even though there is all this upheaval, Isaiah sees that God is actually moving towards a purpose, moving towards the purpose of Jerusalem being the place where his justice and where his judgment goes forth. Just to mention quickly, in chapter 22 there is one little insight here in the figures of Shebna and Eliakim. Just at the end of chapter 22 we see that this national upheaval is actually because of the behaviours of individuals. It's hearts that are involved, and there's the picture of Shebna, who is the royal treasurer, who is amassing wealth for himself, who is having himself carved a wonderful tomb that it will perpetuate his memory. And Isaiah says this will come to nothing, and in fact he will be replaced by Eliakim, who is a trustworthy steward, one who can be entrusted with the good things that God has. And it says that a door he opens cannot be shut. And there's something that when God is working with people whose hearts are in tune with his, things are achieved which cannot be achieved by man himself. Where God locks into a man, finds a man like Eliakim who will serve, then God's purposes will be served to such an extent that they cannot be shut down, they cannot be changed. Have a very good September the 16th.